Portal's Numerology course, Module 3B, a famous numerological profile. This module explores a famous profile, Marilyn Monroe. We will be exploring her life through the lens of numerology to see the interpretation process. Marilyn Monroe. After practicing on family and friends, it's a fun exercise to create numerology profiles for people of interest, whether historical figures, literary heroes, or famous people in the media, film, and other artistic genres or fields. I'm using the profile I created for Marilyn Monroe to illustrate how to prepare and interpret a full numerology reading. To start with, I'll share the basic profile so you can see the details at a glance. Then we'll delve deeper into Marilyn's numbers to help you with preparation for conducting your own numerology readings. As you can see here, I've created a very simplified profile for Marilyn Monroe, and all the details on this profile will be covered throughout this module, so we won't go through it right now. Marilyn is a well-loved icon from the silver screen, sometimes misunderstood and often idolised by those who find her image and mystique irresistible. There are a lot of conspiracy theories related to her death and much speculation about her life and relationships. When choosing a subject to profile, I knew that no matter who I chose, it would be fairly obvious as to the subject's public persona and how much information that could be gleaned from the media, books, the internet, and so on. What was important for me was to ensure that what I already knew about the subject would not colour my interpretations of the calculations. That is a difficult thing to do, as I find that when I do discover certain character traits and other elements regarding the subject, I have the proverbial aha moment, when the numbers resonate with the life and personality of the subject. Having said that, I did discover things, as I usually do, that are either not publicly known or could easily be disputed as speculation, fantasy, or even less than flattering. This profile is by no means a way to gain notoriety, nor is it meant to drum up controversy or scandal. Some people might disagree with the interpretations or feel that their idealism or memories of the subject have been somewhat sullied by the profile. This is not intended, as I am offering this profile as a way to try and understand the subject in a different light, as well as to show fun and interesting exhibitions of my methods. Personality 1. Personality 1 people are usually very independent, industrious, individual, and have the tendency to be loners. They often feel alone, even in a crowded room. They sometimes deal with feelings of isolation, not realizing that they are the ones who isolated themselves. They are original thinkers and have great courage when faced with adversity. For Marilyn, most of the above seems to have been true, as I and others saw her as quite a lonely person even when surrounded by adoring fans and people in the industry. She definitely seemed to have drive, ambition, and always stood out from the crowd. As the personality denotes how others see you, the one vibration was strong for Marilyn in regard to her ability to be one of a kind. Incidentally, the numbers that seem to repeat in her reading include 1, 5, and 9. Personality 1. Tarot Association, the Magician. Marilyn's image was often projected as fresh, exciting and new, as well as having the capability of manifesting raw energy. The Magician also represents new beginnings in the future, with the ability to materialize desires, hopes and dreams. This corresponds with the number 1, emulating energies such as ambition, determination and impatience. Marilyn often appeared to be starting over throughout her short life and seemed to be constantly struggling with trying to reinvent herself, especially in regard to being taken seriously as an actress. She also came across at times as naive and impressionable, but that facade was hiding quite a shrewd intelligence. She was no lame duck and was quite potent in many areas of her life, even though she had her insecurities. Destiny 7. The destiny is also the life path, and a 7 destiny is a life that usually needs to be focused on spirituality, analysis and teaching. Perfectionism can sometimes lead to depression due to feeling like you're never good enough or not hitting the mark. Again, there is much solitude associated with the number 7, so in combination with the 1, it seems that Marilyn indeed had a double whammy of isolation and loneliness, a common theme for her. It's all very good to believe that someone mustn't be lonely when they're surrounded and adored by many people, but anyone famous could tell you that when they go home at night, those who hang around are usually just wanting a piece of the image rather than wanting to get to know who is behind the facade. I often get the feeling that Marilyn was deeply spiritual, but maybe wasn't afforded the opportunity to express that side of herself due to commitments and people having certain expectations, especially regarding her public persona. The 7 destiny is that of a spiritual leader or teacher, and they are also known as the eternal student. Maybe in an alternate dimension she could have pursued that. Destiny 7. Tarot Association, the Chariot. Marilyn's life path, when considered through the energies of the Chariot, involved much introspection about the future. Movement from one place to another, away from bad situations to hopefully a better life, was constantly on her mind. Even though most of us could say the same thing about ourselves, for Marilyn it was a deep-seated and powerful motivator, affecting her decisions regarding her relationships and career. Leaping out of the frying pan and into the fire was a common theme for her. She wanted desperately to share her deepest feelings but could never be sure how they would be received or if they would be turned against her. This would have led to many issues with trust and developing intimacy. Problems with exhaustion, anxiety and drained emotions, especially regarding family and career, were the main triggers for her health problems. Marilyn's numbers on the grid. She had 2 number 1s, which showed good expression and understanding of others. 2 1s are better than 1 as it increases confidence. I think that, to a degree, Marilyn was able to overcome any shyness thanks to her double 1s, although the loneliness might have eroded her confidence somewhat. 1 number 2. She was very intuitive and easily hurt, but good at detecting insincerity. I think that Marilyn was quite a sensitive person, and the fact that she has no 8 in her grid denotes a lack of aggression or strength of ego to combat the sensitivity. She was missing the number 3. This indicates a lack of confidence, although other numbers make up for it. People with a missing 3 often underestimate themselves and put themselves down a lot. They also have trouble thinking logically when under stress or when they're distracted. It could be said that this would explain Marilyn's sporadic marriages and what might have contributed to her untimely death. Of course, hindsight allows us to speculate in any direction, but it's interesting to note. The missing 4. A lack of motivation or direction, disorganization and fear of hard work, not being able to execute practicality. This is a tough one, as it appears that Marilyn was very hard-working and seemed very motivated and determined, especially if you take into consideration her 2 1s, making her quite determined and industrious. The thing with numerology is, if you lack numbers somewhere, they can be balanced if they appear elsewhere in the chart. Missing 5. Constantly needing motivation from others. These people need to set realistic goals and take steps to complete them. Lack of an ability to adapt or change. Again, Marilyn has 5s elsewhere in her chart, at least under the name Marilyn Monroe. She has a hidden tendency ruled by 5, even though it's minor. I did sometimes get the feeling that Marilyn was easily duped by others and was always looking for guidance. I'll interpret her hidden tendencies, etc. under her original name further on. 2 number 6. These people tend to worry a lot, especially about the home and family. They can tend to be overprotective. I also find that people with this vibration have a lot of people dumping their own emotional problems on them. When Marilyn was young, she lived in a lot of foster homes due to her mother's mental instability, etc. The missing 7. Due to Marilyn being a Destiny 7, the lack of the 7 in her grid is not as much of an issue. The missing 7 denotes lack of spirituality and/or lack of understanding for others' feelings, and they don't like being left alone. I think this would have depended on the circumstances in her life at any given time. The missing 8. As explained before regarding the number 2 on the grid, Marilyn had difficulty dealing with her sensitivity, and it also indicates a lack of financial responsibility and the tendency to leave tasks unfinished. The thing is, Marilyn started her own production company, and from what I've read, her estate was quite substantial. Unless someone else managed her money, which is a smart thing to do if you know you can't do it yourself, it seems that, at least in regard to financial instability, it wasn't an issue. 1. Number 9. Everyone born in the 1900s had the same vibration related to the 9. It deals with humanitarianism and compassion, and the century did see a more humane civilization emerge. Notwithstanding the fact that a lot of crimes against humanity occurred, along with the decimation of the earth and cruelty to animals, people at least had the idea that it was wrong and tried to do something about it. Marilyn, like everyone else born in that century, had a strong desire to improve herself and the world. The Arrow of Skepticism. Marilyn has the Arrow of Skepticism, which pretty much means what it says. The missing numbers, 3, 5 and 7, reveal a tendency to be a little more suspicious than other people and not being so easily fooled. It can also mean a lack of faith or needing to see things before they believe them. I certainly don't think Marilyn was a fool, even though she might have been vulnerable at times. The name. Note, the following interpretations are based on her name as Marilyn Monroe. The motivation 9. Marilyn was motivated by the need to be compassionate and unconventional. She wanted to be all things to all people. Inner self 1. A strong desire to be creative, independent and to be left alone. Ties in with her issues of loneliness and isolation, oscillating between needing time to herself and the need for support from others. Expression 1. This is how others saw her as well as how she projected herself. Again with the number 1, coming across as very independent and doing exactly what she wanted. It might not have been what was truly going on, but it was how she appeared to others. Also, coming across as either a loner or very lonely. Karmic Lessons. Ruled by the number 2. Lessons dealing with the emotions and oversensitivity. I dare say she did have to develop a thick skin in Hollywood, although she did come across as someone who needed to toughen up a bit. She spent a lot of time with a psychoanalyst. Ruled by the number 8. A need to learn how to use the power of authority wisely, harnessing the ego and issues related to it. Being a famous actress and wanted by everybody would inflate anybody's ego. However, Marilyn appeared to have a lid on it to a certain degree. Also, lessons regarding financial security and karmic events or people. Subconscious response 7. This means that in a crisis, she was the type to withdraw into her shell. Hidden tendencies. The minor 5. To a minor degree, Marilyn had issues with over-gratifying the senses. Can be to do with drugs, alcohol, sex, etc. Making changes too quickly. Minor 9. To a minor degree, she could be judgmental and didn't suffer fools gladly. Not a bad thing, but it could indicate the tendency to look down her nose at others with a lower level of intelligence. At times, overly concerned with the problems of humanity. The name, Norma Jean Mortensen. The following interpretations are based on her name as Norma Jean Mortensen, as it appeared on her birth certificate, although it was apparently a wrong spelling and later changed to Baker. I take into consideration the exact name when first born. Motivation 8. Motivated by ego, ambition, and the need to control others, striving to achieve and acquire. This would have been the vibration had she kept her original name. It could have been an improvement. Certainly, people wouldn't have been able to walk over her as easily, or at least her sensitive nature would have been tempered by the power of the 8. Inner Self 5. A social hub or centre of attention. With the 5 major hidden tendencies, see further down, it would have made her the oversexed life of the party, a strong need for freedom and mental stimulation. Expression 4. Marilyn would have come across as picky and a perfectionist with a strong need for structure. She would have been practical, critical, and would have had to have had everything in its place. Under these vibrations, she would have been a very different person, not as sweet and gentle as she has been remembered. She would have been quite the control freak. Karmic Lesson 3. Marilyn would have had the lesson of learning how to express herself verbally. She might have had a speech impediment. Karmic Lesson 7. She might have had deep depression and would have need to have learned how to keep faith when the chips were down. Karmic Lesson 8. Learning how to control the ego, and again harnessing the ego and learning how to use her power of authority. When it comes down to it, she chose the right name with Marilyn Monroe. Subconscious Response 6. In a crisis, Marilyn would have been overly sentimental, running to her family. Hidden Tendencies Major 1. Marilyn would have been too proud to ask for help when she needed it, to a major degree. Also, very egocentric, or the opposite, would have totally disregarded herself. Major 5. She would have, again, made changes too quickly and to a major degree would have over-gratified the senses. Minor 6. To a minor degree, Marilyn would have been overly concerned with others' problems, or they would have used her as an emotional dumping ground. Life Cycles and Pinnacles. Until the age of 29, Marilyn's circumstances were focused mostly on the home and family. A lot of issues dealing with the family and a strong need for stability. There was also a strong sense of responsibility, especially in regard to the family. Marilyn had a lot of influence on the family, and if insecure, married young, which she did. Lots of guilt. There were opportunities to learn and develop spiritually. She was a serious child and had trouble expressing herself with words. She observed from a distance and was very intuitive. Maybe she stuttered or had some kind of a speech impediment, which ties in with her first name and its vibrations. There were a few losses that seriously impacted her emotional growth. She was a good student. Marilyn died in the next life cycle and pinnacle at the age of 36. She was under the vibration of double ones, a 1 life cycle and 1 pinnacle. The period covered by the pinnacle was age 29 to 38 and up to age 56 for the life cycle. This means that she was definitely in charge of her life and her career, achieving a lot on her own 2 feet, but dealing with bouts of loneliness. There is a lot more involved with Marilyn's chart, in particular the yearly interpretations. The year she died, she was governed by a 2 essence and 7 personal year. These 2 combinations indicate deep depression and emotional problems, which is aligned with what we know of the events surrounding her death. Like anyone else, she had a lot of ups and downs. When I look at her yearly interpretations, I see that if she had gone on to live, there would have been more turbulent times ahead of her. There are periods of desperate loneliness and a couple of major losses in the following decade, especially in regard to her family. However, if she could have held on until the age of 54, especially if she had strong support from people who truly loved her, she would have entered a great period of spiritual development. We all have trials and tribulations in our lives, but hopefully we have a good support network around us that will come to the rescue when the darkness hits. Unfortunately, it seems that Marilyn was mixing with the wrong crowd and couldn't cope with it all on her own. Her image might have become too big a cross to bear without the reprieve of solace and with the types she had gravitating towards her. Finally, I'll share some notes about her yearly interpretations to illustrate patterns and periods of interest. When you're conducting readings for other people, you might want to do the same when it comes to interpreting the yearly interpretations, since it can be quite complex and lengthy. If the querent asks about certain periods, you can certainly focus on the number combinations to answer their questions. So here's the chart again for Marilyn Monroe's yearly interpretations, and we're not going to go through every year, but I'm going to show the notable periods. For example, between the ages 5 and 10, Marilyn had 8 reappear in her life. So you can see here ages 5 and 10, see the 8s repeating, and also at age 6 there was a lot of strife going on, probably in the home. You can see the double 4s there. It was quite a karmic time during 5 and 10, ages 5 and 10, and of course when we're looking at the double 4s we could be talking about health issues. There could be mental or physical problems which would have impacted her quite a bit. Between the ages of 11 and 16, as you can see here, she had quite a lot of 5s, which was good because, as I've mentioned, the 5 makes other numbers lighter, and as I think it was the age 16, she's got the double 5, which would have been a really good year for her. Probably a lot of mental activity, probably a lot of attention from other people. And the interesting thing is it was at that age that she was married to her first husband, so there was a lot of freedom and gratification of the senses. At the age of 20, which you can see down here, we can see the combination of the 2 and 9. She might have been dealing with depression and loss due to the combination of those two numbers. And between the ages of 25 and 29, you can see all the 6s there in the essence, as well as here at the age 26 there's a double whammy, which is a big focus on the home and family. So what's interesting is that others might have been using and abusing her, and she was dealing with a lot of guilt. And then when you see the 6 and 9 together at age 29, there could have been a loss, especially with the family, with those two numbers together. So when we look at the age of 30, she had a bad year and might have been depressed and feeling very alone with the 7 and 1 combination. The following 2 years were better and highly creative due to the 3s. As you can see, there's a 3 in the essence, which was the background of her life at age 31, and then there was a 3 in the foreground. So those 2 years might have been a little bit more uplifting than what it was before. So she had a difficult and karmic year at age 33 with the combination of 8 and 4. Not necessarily to do with money, but difficulties with other people. And then at age 35, she could have been dealing with karma associated with family and the year of... So hang on, where is it? 35. That could have been karma to do with the family. And as we mentioned before, the year of her death at age 36, as you can see. She had depressive and even existential thoughts if you take the numbers into consideration. The 7 and 2, of course, again is depression. So that's what happened up until the time of her death. When you go on, you can see there's in the background of her life some very lonely numbers and maybe emotional issues, endings of course at 38, and then a double 1, so she would have been feeling really isolated and alone at age 39. When we go on, again there's the 1s and there's a 6 and a 2, so family issues. It really doesn't get until a little bit later on when you get to her 50s, where there's the sevens start showing up a bit, and then of course further on in her life. So she's got clusters of sevens, but also the ones. So I'm not going to go on and on about this, because it was really more of a way of showing you how we can look at the charts. The double ones, something to think about. Any number that's doubled, of course, you've got a double whammy of energies. Anytime you see a 9 and a 6, it's usually endings or changes, sometimes death in the family. If you ever see a 7 and a 4 together, it could mean hospital visits or injuries. So if you just take into consideration the vibrations of the base numbers, going back to that module, I think it would be 1B, if I remember. So you can just go back and look at those numbers and then compare them with the numbers for the essences and the personal user. You'll get an idea of how to read what's going on. Task 27. In your workbook, note your impressions or any insights you might have gleaned from this module. Was it helpful when it comes to how to use a numerology profile to conduct a reading? What would you do differently?